Okay. Hi, everyone. This is Stephanie Coleman. I am the Family Support Coordinator at the Kansas LEN program. LEN stands for Leadership Education and Neurodevelopmental and Related Disabilities. We are a workforce training program that we train clinical students, family members, and self-advocates to learn to work as a team to help individuals with developmental disabilities in the future when they go out into the real world after school. We're excited to have you. I know some of you have been with us before, some of you are new, so welcome to those of you who have not been with us before. Just a few housekeeping tips. I want to let you know if your video is on and our slides are down, you will show up on Facebook. So if you don't want to be seen on Facebook, make sure that your video is off when our slides are down. So want to give you that heads up. Your name will not show up on Facebook if your video is off. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Sean Swindler is going to share just a little bit of information before we get into our main event with Kacy Seitz, Able Accounts versus Special Needs Trusts, an in-depth discussion. Also, we sent out a survey earlier this afternoon. If you have not had a chance, we'll put that survey in the chat box. We'd love to get your feedback. And if you complete the pre-survey and the post-survey, you will be entered into a drawing for one of two $25 Visa cards. And for those of you on Facebook, you will also have that survey there. Sean, if you're talking, go ahead.
So we've talked last month about this, but I was going to talk again about an exciting study that we're recruiting for. The Kansas University Center on Developmental Disabilities has a grant from NIDLR to do a project with the self-determined career design model. And what that really means is helping people age 18 and up with intellectual and developmental disabilities set some goals and explore some goals for possible careers. And we're going to be recruiting for this starting in February or March. And what's exciting about it is that this is something delivered completely through telehealth, really designed to respond to the world we live in right now, but also even if we emerge from COVID, to help serve people in rural areas better or people who lack transportation. And what this project does is it supports people to set up and go after their own employment and career goals. And that means that it could be an 18-year-old who's just entering the workforce who wants to decide they want to work and explore what some options for work could be for them. It could be a 40-year-old with an intellectual disability who lost their job due to COVID and wants to explore something new or to explore a way to enter the workforce in a different way. So really anybody in those groups. And so what happens is people will meet with a facilitator in groups of 2 or 3 for a year, and they will receive this intervention, which is basically once a week helping people choose, design career goals using this model. And so interested in, again, people 18 and older who have an intellectual disability or interested in employment can communicate in all sorts of different ways. So it's not limited to people who just can communicate verbally. And if people don't have access to the internet, we'll figure out devices for them and make sure they can get on. And so again, it's 1-hour sessions once a week, and it's really helping people set goals on what's going to happen next for them to either enter employment or to change their status in employment so that they can do something they're choosing that maybe makes them more money or something that fits them better. And we are recruiting participants through March. And we're going to be starting to train facilitators, and then we'll begin in April. So 2 asks. I'm going to put in chat the form to fill out if you're interested in being contacted about being a part of the study. But also we're looking for facilitators, and we're paying our facilitators. So if you think you'd be interested in learning this model and helping facilitate this with people, please contact Evan Dean, and you'll see again in chat the contact information. One more quick plug we just put out this week. We have our Autism Across the Lifespan conference coming. That's going to be April 23rd, 2021. And the adventure this time is it's virtual, so it's all going to be online. And so Jim Bodfish and Julie Lowndes Taylor, both from Vanderbilt, are our keynotes. They were going to be our keynotes in 2020 before we had to cancel. So we're excited they're going to be with us. So there's the website. And if you're interested in that conference, please look it up and register. So thank you all. Look at the chat for the information.
Okay, hello everybody. Do you want me to go ahead and start, Stephanie? You can just nod your head, thanks. My name is Kacy Seitz. I know Stephanie and Sean pretty well. I've known them for many years. Sean and I both serve on the DD Council, and I'm here to talk to you this evening about a fairly popular topic in the special needs and the disability community. We're gonna go over two really key tools that you can use if you are a parent or a caregiver to an adult or a child with a disability. The two that are here shown on the screen, and hopefully while you're here, are ABLE accounts and special needs trusts. So we're gonna go into some detail about this. My contact information is here on the screen. Feel free to write that down. I also show this at the end. So if you would like to get in touch with me individually and talk about any questions that you're not maybe wanting to share on the screen or the video recording today, let me know. Or if you would like to talk about your own family situation as far as overall financial planning, I am here. So when we talk about planning for those with a disability, one of the things that I really want to emphasize is just how much this market or how much these topics are very common in our world, okay? When I first became a special needs parent, I felt pretty alone. It was extremely isolating in the beginning. So for me, learning about some of this data and some of these statistics really helped me understand that this is a very large community of people. So I hope this helps you as well. 82% of us as caregivers are concerned that we do not have enough financial resources to last our child or our disabled adult's lifetime. Is that you? Raise your hand, maybe. 77% of caregivers are concerned they won't be able to retire. And then 70% believe they will have to compromise their own retirement plans in order to provide for their child or adult with special needs. This was certainly me before I learned exactly how to put this planning together. 60% of caregivers with life insurance have less than $300,000 of coverage, and fewer than half of those have the protection of whole life coverage. However, the lifetime cost of caring for example, a person with autism can be anywhere from $1.4 to $2.4 million. And yes, that is out of pocket. 73% of caregivers don't have long-term care insurance or really a long-term care plan in place. It doesn't always have to be long-term care insurance. 87% of people are concerned about what will happen. This was my biggest emotional / fear point. What happens if something happens to my husband or myself? And who is going to take care of our daughter? What does that look like? I think this is the main reason why a lot of families hesitate to maybe start this planning or even talk about it, because there is so much fear around that question. So if this is you, please know you're not alone. This is can be a very emotional and grief processing conversation. 59% of people have not written a will addressing the special needs of their relative, and 67% of parents have not set up a special needs trust, which we're going to talk about tonight and what that is. And only 23% of families have what I would consider a formal financial plan for their dependent, with only about 37% of those working with some type of financial advisor. Okay, so this is data that was taken from a survey done a few years ago. It's fairly recent. I would say one of the main reasons why I do these educational topics and talk all over the country about topics like this is because I would love to see these percentages go down considerably. I would like to see a world where special needs or disability planning is as common and as typical as retirement planning, no matter what financial advisor you went to go see. That's my vision. This is my family. My husband is there on the left. His name is Dan. He is a stay-at-home dad. My son is in the middle. His name is Dominic. And our daughter, who is the reason why I'm here tonight, her name is Hudson. She's there in the front with her big toothy grin. She's 10 years old. Her disability came from a birth injury. My placenta abrupted during a very unexpected and yet healthy labor and pregnancy. She has a pretty long list of diagnoses as a result of that oxygen deprivation during labor. Spastic quad cerebral palsy is the main one. So she is in a wheelchair and she needs help with every single piece of her daily life. She has cortical visual impairment. She has epilepsy. She is G-tube dependent, nonverbal, non-mobile. Now, when most people look at that list, it's a pretty complex and she would be considered medically fragile on paper. But this kid is one of the hardest workers I know, and she is very communicative. She has a couple of different devices that we use with her and have taught her how to communicate with us. So we know things about this little girl who's inside a body that is very difficult to be in. She loves stories. She loves being read to. Her favorite color is purple. I'm sorry, I know a lot of you might be KU fans because of the program tonight, but I will say her grandparents, my parents, live near Manhattan. And so I think that's where that probably came from. So forgive me, I'm crossing a little bit of a line there with the rivalry, I'm sure. She loves Latin music. So Enrique Iglesias is one of her favorite musicians, and you know, I can't blame her. He's got some pretty good music. So she'll smile, she will work for time to listen to Enrique. So we kind of use that in therapy sometimes as a motivator. And then of course, like many other little girls, she is very, very girly. She is into anything that sparkles, Disney princesses. You can see the big bow in her hair. Like if we don't have a bow and her hair done for the day, it's not going to be a good day. So she has to look her best. That's very important to her. Professionally, I've been in financial services for about 15 years. I actually founded the Kansas City Special Needs Planning practice here locally with Northwestern Mutual. But while I was in financial services before 2013, so before I opened my practice, you know, I had Hudson in 2010. And I was working with a lot of other advisors across the country, doing a variety of things in business development and marketing. And, you know, we had a financial advisor at the time for our family. I had a lot of questions, you know, in being a planner, being someone who really was forward thinking. I wanted to know exactly what I needed to do, how we should be thinking about Hudson's long-term plans if we were blessed to have her for a long period of time, and how that might affect what we did today. And unfortunately, that advisor just didn't have the knowledge and wasn't specialized in the area of disability planning. And so I went looking. I went looking across the whole United States for an advisor that could help us and that maybe was considered more of a specialist. And guess how many I found? Like a handful. And the closest one was in Chicago. So I set out at that point in time to make a career change. And I decided to become an advisor. It took me about 2 years to complete all the training and certifications, get my practice up and running. And here we are about 8 years later. I am very thankful and so honored to be able to work with other families like ours across the country. So I work with several hundred families in about 26 states now. And most of that happened because of this information you're going to hear tonight and how I do a lot of some of this planning, which is, to me, education first. And whether or not you become a client, I know you're going to find some value in this evening's workshop. If you do have questions, like I said, Stephanie is monitoring the chat. If you're on Facebook with us tonight, please make a comment and we'll try and get to those at the end. The mission for my practice is really, like I said, education first. So making sure that all the partners at the table, whether that's myself, other people that we bring to the table for the family, for you, are all on the same page in relationship to what the family's goals are. We want to make sure we're guiding caregivers, whoever that may be. Sometimes I'm working with grandparents. Sometimes it is aunts and uncles or parents themselves. It doesn't matter to me who it is. Whatever we're doing, we have to make sure everyone is working toward that same goal and vision for the child or the adult with the disability. And then part of that is also facilitating a lot of different conversations. Sometimes that's emotional. It's not unusual. We have boxes of Kleenex while we're talking through really hard decisions and things, and that's normal. That's fine. We also have to sometimes have those conversations with key family members, people who may take over care after you're gone, or if you can't do that care anymore because you get older or you become disabled yourself. So we have to navigate all of this complexity to make sure that we create this sustainable, high quality of life for everybody in the family, right? You deserve a retirement. You deserve to also have financial independence as much as your children do. And so we want to make sure that that absolutely happens. This is one of my favorite slides of the whole presentation. These are all my awesome faces. Some are the kiddos that I work with. Many are photos that we got to take pre-COVID. I miss taking these pictures. My daughter and I are on the left, obviously, but then these other kiddos are all across the country. And we really approach this work with a lot of grace, integrity, and compassion. Those are really important to me to create this financial independence for everybody in the family. So why are we here? Why are we using tools like ABLE accounts and special needs trust? Well, many of you may know that those with disabilities qualify for benefits, and certain federal means tested benefits, things like Medicaid, traditional Medicaid, so supplemental security income, and also some state and local programs are means tested, which means we can't have more than $2,000 in assets at any given time in that child or adult's name in order to qualify. So before we had these tools, it was basically we had to leave those with disabilities in poverty, and their families were responsible for taking on a lot of the management of financial management of things, and sometimes that caused issues. So we now have some things that we're going to go over tonight that help us to stay qualified for benefits and still then have access to either inheritance or some type of income. Maybe it's employment income. This is very, very important when each of these kiddos turns 18 and becomes a legal adult by whatever state they're residing in. Last and most important, I would say, is I will ask families a lot of the time about their estate planning. What is estate planning? These are legal documents that if something happens to you, where do your kids go and who is taking care of them? And then most importantly, when your kids are adults, if they need or have to have guardianship or conservatorship, who's doing that as your backup? Okay. So I'll ask, if you don't have an estate plan in place, what do you think happens to your children if you pass away prematurely or you become incapacitated? And a lot of times I'll get responses like, well, my sister will take over the care, or my brother, my parents, maybe this person who's really close to my son. And I said, well, is that legally documented anywhere? Is it notarized? Is it filed with the county? Do you have that in place? And you guys still there? Okay, good. Sorry, I had a little blip or something happen. And the reality is a judge actually decides where your children will go if you don't have that estate plan in place. So that's a little scary, but it's the reality. And in the meantime, while you're waiting for a court date, which during COVID was delayed if it wasn't an emergent case, your child, if they're a minor, will go into state custody. In other words, they will be provided for by the foster care system. So in learning that, that became a motivator for myself and also a lot of the folks that I work with to get those legal documents done. And I will tell you, they are not hard to complete. It does require you to make some decisions that might be decisions that are hard to talk about, but once they are completed, I promise you will feel better. Okay, Building your team. Let's talk a little bit about who we need at the table in order to really create financial security, both now and in the future for your child. So a financial professional, definitely someone like myself, or someone who's qualified in special needs planning. Doesn't have to be me. If you don't like me for any reason, that's fine. But talk to someone who's been doing this for a long time, and that the primary focus of their practice is serving and helping those with disabilities. Second, government benefits specialist. This is probably the least known person or team member that families have. And I will tell you that this can be a lot of different people. It certainly can be a care coordinator or case manager, but most often this is someone who that at least I'm recommending is someone who is going to be pretty well educated on state, local, federal benefits in multiple states, not just maybe in the state that you live in. The reason I say that is because sometimes families move. Sometimes we need to move for a career or something else. Maybe you're in the military and that's required. It's just nice and a lot easier than to have someone who is pretty fluent across the board. Attorney, estate planning attorney, that is experienced in special needs planning. I have a list of questions that typically I will give a family when they are interviewing estate planning attorneys to ask. So if you would like that list of questions, please let me know or shoot me an email and I will send it to you, okay? These three people, what do? Well, the attorney is pretty self-explanatory. They're gonna develop the documents. So one of which, the special needs trust, we're gonna talk about tonight. Guardianship. Some attorneys can do the trust and guardianship. Some do one or the other. So you need to ask about that if that's something that you are going to have to do in the near future, or potentially you want to get done at the same time. Usually you can get a little bit better quote unquote price if you work with an attorney that can do both. All right. Will, that's for you and any other person at the table that's a current caregiver. Powers of attorney, powers of healthcare are certainly important. And then letter of intent. So this is also called a memorandum of care. It's not technically a legal document. And again, I think you guys have that as a download. If you don't, let me know and I can, Stephanie or I can send that out. Financial advisor is going to talk to you about money, right? Protecting, making sure if something happens to you now or something happens to you in the future, your assets, your financial security is protected. In addition, you make sure that whatever it is you're wanting to leave your family is in the amount or what you want, okay? Investments, right? That's probably traditionally what people think of when they hear that a person is a financial advisor. Oh, you're an investment person. Well, usually we want someone that also can do the insurance piece as well as the investments. In addition, you need someone that can also make sure that they're talking about how do we fund the special needs trust? What goes in it? What are good things? What are bad things to go in it? And exactly how much needs to go into that special needs trust? That's probably the one thing when I talk to other financial advisors, especially those in the special needs world or the world where we are planning for someone, a secondary dependent. I often get looks like, why are you asking that question, Kacy? Well, of course, we're going to fund the trust. It's going to be with whatever retirement assets are left over from the parents. And I will say, yeah, but what if there aren't a lot? Now what? Now we've done all this planning. The family has spent money creating a special needs trust, but there's nothing to put in it. You know, that doesn't make sense. So that trust funding piece is extremely important. And I have yet to meet a really, really good financial advisor that piece is the focus. So be sure that if you do have a financial planner or financial advisor that you bring up that question. How much does need to go into this? Let's figure that out, because to me, that question is just as important as your retirement question. When can I retire? How much can I retire with? Last person, especially not the least, government benefits specialist. What do? Well, certainly they're going to help us maximize and get access to all the state, local, and federal programs, but they are the ones to remove conflict of interest from the financial advisor. They're the ones who are also going to say, oh, let's figure out how much it's going to cost to take care of this adult with a disability. So let's say they have a job, let's say they're employed, let's say they get some benefits from Medicaid, but there might be out-of-pocket costs for that adult that, you know, the parents were covering. Maybe it was transportation. Maybe it was private one-on-one caregiving when mom and dad were either working or gone. Maybe it was just someone to check in every now and again. For my daughter, I need 24/7 care. And I can promise you, even though we're on the TA waiver in Kansas, that I need someone besides just the nursing company to show up at my house if something happens to me, because guess what? Nurses sometimes just don't show up for shifts. And that can't happen, right? Her care would be jeopardized. So making sure all these people are at the table, making sure they're communicating on your behalf, and making sure too that this is updated on a regular basis. So developing your special needs plan, this is just going back to the government benefit specialist. What do we do? How do we figure out how much it will cost out of pocket? Is all going to be dependent on a few variables. Number one, where do you live? For my families who live here in the Midwest, it's a very different cost of living than if you lived in San Diego, California, or Buffalo, New York. I'm thinking of you, Stephanie. I don't know if you're from Buffalo, but you told me you're from New York. So what is the care that you provide, right? So Stephanie's son has very different care needs or management needs than my daughter. That's going to be a different cost plan. And then after you figure that out, how much will benefits cover? And so what is your actual annual out-of-pocket cost, or what is it going to take? And then ideally, the financial advisor is going to take that number and project it forward with inflation, maybe some investment returns. You get an actual financial plan by doing this, all right? So again, if your child outlives you, the care that you provide now is likely not going to be free anymore, right? I don't charge Hudson to take her to swim therapy, which by the way, I'm not doing right now because it's like, 2 degrees outside. But somebody needs to take her. And so they're probably not going to do it for free. If they did, then that would be a financial burden on them and their family, even if it is a family member of mine. I don't want that. So what is that going to take? And where is it documented? Right? That's not going to be in the estate plan, and it's certainly not going to be necessarily in their care plan with your case manager. So how do we do that? How do we develop all of this? Okay, now that I've completely overwhelmed you with the 10,000-foot view, we're going to get a little more granular. Third-party special needs trusts. So there's several different kinds of special needs trusts. The ones we're going to talk about tonight is the most common and the one that typically I will recommend for most families. And that's called a third party or a supplemental special needs trust. Basically, anything that we dedicate into this trust will not be counted against the individual with special needs or the disability for access to benefits. Okay, so it helps us to make sure that health insurance, other employment programs, community supports, home and community-based supports are all preserved. At the same time, we can leave life insurance, we can leave, a house, we can leave a car, we can leave investment assets, retirement accounts, whatever we can put into this. It's very flexible. And really anyone except your child with the disability can contribute to it. So it allows us a lot of flexibility for the future. I work with some families who have had what are called first party special needs trusts, and usually those happen as a result of some type of lawsuit settlement, or they received money or assets in their name directly, and we've had to get them out or put those in a first party trust. But that's a whole other topic, and I'm going to leave that maybe for some question and answer at the end. Most of the time, though, we want what's called a third party trust because there isn't a Medicaid clawback on the third party. Okay, so in order to create this, you have to work with an attorney, and you are going to want to work with a specific type of attorney. These sometimes are called elder law attorneys. I look for attorneys that are very involved in the special needs and the disability community, because they are staying up to date with the changes that are happening in special needs law. I'm part of an organization called the Academy of Special Needs Planners. I'm actually speaking at their national conference in the next couple of months. They are a great resource, and that organization is for attorneys and financial advisors to continue to get continuing education for special needs planning. So I would ask that. Are you a member of that organization? What conferences do you attend to better your profession? And if the answer is, well, you know, I'm not part of that, but I do these all the time, I might want to know, then where are you getting your updated information, right? Because, for example, the last couple of years we've had some big changes in the legal area that have really affected special needs trusts. Things like the Secure Act and how retirement assets can be spent down once they're in a trust. Very, very important to understand that and know that, and you want an attorney who can help guide you through that. I also will typically recommend having either a corporate trustee, a bank, maybe an attorney serve as the trustee of the special needs trust. Stephanie, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you to repeat that name of that association.
Oh, sorry. The Academy. Yeah, the Academy of Special Needs Planners, ASNP. And you can Google it. Very large organization. They have a board of directors, and they were founded by Kevin Urbach, who is a very well-known attorney out in Pleasantville, California. He's also a dad of a son with autism. So highly reputable, great organization. They also have a really good website, by the way, for you as parents, if you or even case managers or professionals in the community. If you'd like to go there, I think it's specialneedsanswers.com. It's a great resource for new updated information on special needs trusts and some of the legal pieces to this type of planning. Okay, so again, I would look at having someone other than a family member serve as trustee. Why? I've learned a lot after working with families for 8 years in this space, and although family members are very well-meaning, most of the time family members are not professionals when it comes to administering these types of trusts. And we will talk about some of the specifics around that, but you must be a fiduciary to be a trustee. If you have funds that are distributed inappropriately, one of the examples I can give you that to me would be very common and actually has happened quite a bit is, let's say, you know, your brother takes over as the trustee for your son's special needs trust. You're gone. He loves your son. He's taking care of your son. He's doing all the right things. And he decides one day, because his car broke down and he doesn't have enough money to purchase a new vehicle, but he needs to get your son to and from his job, he's going to go ahead and use the trust funds for purchasing a vehicle for himself, justifying that this is transportation for the child or the adult with a disability. Unfortunately, because of how Medicaid law works, that would be an inappropriate use of funds. That is not primarily for the adult with a disability. Therefore, Medicaid could say, hey, either put that back in the trust, or we're going to go ahead and count that as a countable asset. So kind of can get into trouble, and they are liable as a trustee for any of those misappropriations. It was well-meaning, but he didn't know, right? So that can jeopardize benefits. That can really negate all of the planning. So the more I've learned and the more I've seen some of these different stories and things that have happened that aren't great, I really do think having a corporate trustee of some kind, and typically I'll recommend a trust company, someone or an organization that has a really good depth of experience in working with Medicaid and answering questions if Medicaid ever has those questions, or even Social Security officers. Somebody who maybe has defended a special needs trust in Medicaid court. I think that's really important. They know the language, they understand how to be creative in getting things done and making sure benefits are preserved. So if you need more information on who to select as a trustee or how that works, please let me know. I have a large list of very reputable organizations and companies that could help. And then life insurance can be a funding vehicle for a special needs trust. I do like that primarily as leverage. Usually families who have smaller means or maybe even a middle income family, life insurance is a great way to be able to leverage a large amount of money into a special needs trust for a small amount of cost while they're living. So that could be something too that you consider. Also, life insurance goes into a special needs trust tax-free. There's literally no other vehicle or investment that does that. That can save a lot of money in sending anything to the IRS. And then lastly, this trust can be set up so that any remaining assets can pass to either family members, potentially a nonprofit organization you care about, if or when your child or adult with a disability also then passes away. Okay. Letter of intent, this is one of the PDFs that Stephanie sent around to everybody. This is, again, not a legal document, but it is something that I think is super important. This is your set of instructions as parents. This is what you do day in and day out that maybe you're not really telling everybody exactly what it is you do on a daily basis for your child. So of course it is the, doctors, the professionals, their contact information. But it's also information like, hey, these are triggers for my child. These are challenges. These are things that really bother them, or these are really things they like. So if you're needing them to be motivated, you might try this. I know I've heard a lot of moms say, well, I know my son better than anybody, and so just let me do it. Well, that's fine for now, but when you're not here anymore or something happens to you, what do we do? And how do we make sure then your son is protected and that he just lost his mom, which is a trauma all in itself, but now we don't know how to soothe him. We don't know how to comfort him, right? This is where the letter of intent really becomes important. We also can talk about things like very little nuances in the day. One of the things I'll give an example of is my daughter. She has a cortical visual impairment. What that means is she doesn't see directly on very well, but she can see peripherally almost better than most people can see straight on. So putting things to her side rather than facing directly on is a good idea. Second, she loves fireworks. So on the 4th of July, she wants to be part of the fireworks display. Well, because of the noise and the intensity of the sensory of a live fireworks display, we would ask or document in her letter of intent that you just turn on a big television or let her watch the fireworks outside of a window so that she doesn't have to experience the noise, which might cause a seizure. So those little things, right? Those are very, very important for someone who is going to take over care for your child, okay? Certainly there's things in here too that you can document. And this is an electronic PDF, by the way, so take it, save it, update it every year if you can, because things change over time, and put it in a place. Typically I tell families to leave it with either, tell someone that, hey, this is going to go with our legal documents. This is going to go with his or her care plan. However you want to do that, just try and make sure that this continues to be part of the overall binder or plan, because it is literally the set of instructions that replaces you. To me, this is probably the biggest gap in most families' planning, is that we don't really have that set of instructions. And so we're not really sure. We have to do a lot of guessing, right? We have the special needs trust, we've got the ABLE account, we've got the financial means. Certainly you might have a care plan with your care coordinator, your case manager. But this is the guts. This really fills in the time and the space that those folks may not know about, because it's what you do. It's what you do as a caregiver. Okay, let's dive into this topic now. Let's get into a little more detail. So ABLE accounts, what are these? ABLE was created in 2014 by President Obama before he left office. And it is the section code of the IRS called 529A. Many of you might be familiar with the traditional 529 plans, which are also called college savings plans. Okay, this is a subset of that. So these are not just for education though. These were created by a group of families, many of whom had a child or an adult with a disability. And they lobbied for a very long time through Congress to get ABLE signed into law. So I love that. I love that this came from actual families. It stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience, so 529A or ABLE. And these accounts can be set up anytime prior to age 26, as long as the disability happened before age 26. So it doesn't cover everyone with a disability. For example, if you had a stroke or you had a traumatic brain injury at age 42, you wouldn't be able to set one of these up, unfortunately, at least not now. They are trying to work on federal legislation that changes, but as of now, if it's 26 or under, okay? This will not affect, any money we put into this will not affect Medicaid eligibility, no matter how large the account grows. However, If you are receiving SSI or have the intention that that child or adult will get SSI, we can't have the account go over $100,000 in total, or it will affect that SSI amount. Contributions are post-tax, and they are not tax deductible at the federal level. So a lot of people ask me, do I get a tax deduction for putting money in ABLE? The answer is no. However, in Kansas, in Missouri, you do get a state tax deduction for putting money into ABLE. So that can be some incentive for you or maybe family members to help contribute to these. Assets do grow tax-free. So the money inside of it is kind of like a Roth IRA. It will grow tax-free. And as long as we use it for the child or the adult with a disability that this is assigned to, it will, all distributions will be tax and penalty free. Okay, that's the basics. Let's talk a little bit about what we can use the money for. We can still use a 529A for education. So if you have a program, Project Search or anything like that, that you're wanting to have your child attend, even private high school, or I have a couple kiddos that will go to some of the local Catholic schools. Absolutely, we can use tuition, or as tuition is a qualified expense from ABLE. Housing can be a qualified expense. I want to stress here that if they are getting SSI, we need to use the SSI money first, and then ABLE can supplement housing and utilities. Transportation, employment training, assistive technology, any kind of personal support. So that's one-on-one caregiving, PCA, any of that. Deductibles for health insurance, co-pays, basically any expenses that will improve the independence or quality of life for that adult or child. And then one thing I will say, this is a good benefit for Kansas, not so much for Missouri, but any money left in ABLE plans typically will have a Medicaid clawback. So if your child passes away and there's $10,000 left in, and they've received Medicaid support, whether that's on a waiver or traditional, Medicaid can say, hey, we want to put a lien on that account and try to get that money back. However, in Kansas, Governor Collier a few years ago actually repealed that for Kansas ABLE accounts. So for Kansas residents, we don't have to worry about the Medicaid clawback. So I hope that's a positive for you. I don't get to say that in every state. I think we're one of 5 states or so that actually has, the states get control of whether or not they want to enforce that federal rule, which is the Medicaid clawback, and Kansas chose not to. So yay, we did something right. Okay. If you guys want to learn a lot more than what I'm able to provide in 30 minutes or 40 minutes tonight, go to ABLE National Resource Center. So it's ablenrc.org, ablenrc.org. This is a website that is run by the National Disability Institute. Phenomenal organization. They have a ton of information and other webinars and detailed podcasts and all kinds of things that you can go and learn about, and specifically even to Kansas or Missouri for those of you who are from those states. If you live in a different state, you can pick your state. I like this map because it shows you how many states have enacted or have chosen to enact and manage ABLE accounts. There's only a handful that have not done that. If you know of a family, or maybe you decide to move to one of the states in the gray, never fear, because those states actually have the option to open any other state's ABLE account if their state doesn't offer it. So that's a good thing. So I have a lot of families up in Wisconsin. Northwestern Mutual is headquartered in Milwaukee, and they can open basically any state's ABLE plan. It's not like they're excluded, so that's good. Okay, benefits of ABLE accounts. Let's talk about the pros of these. Number one, I love that this creates independence. So it allows a person with a disability to set up their own account with their own information instead of necessarily relying on a parent or guardian to do the first party special needs trust with their money. Okay, so they're working, they're earning income, they can use this as a savings or an investment account for themselves. They can go online and they can manage it themselves if they're capable of doing that. So a lot of states also offer what are called prepaid debit cards to the account. So if they're out and about in the community, it's just like a debit card like you and I would have for a bank account, and they can spend their money very easily doing that. They can manage their own funds, meaning they aren't as reliant on others for assistance. So I have a lot of adults with physical disabilities, not necessarily cognitive, they like this, right? It gives them some freedom and it still protects their benefits. The funds do grow tax-free, which is a huge benefit, and they are not subject to gift tax restrictions. Like I said, Kansas offers the state tax deduction, so does Missouri. By the way, those are differing amounts, so depending on which state you're in, be sure and take a look at that or talk to me and I can tell you what those amounts are. It does depend on your tax filing status. They're very easy to set up and manage. By the way, these are typically managed by the state's Treasury Department in whatever state you're in. So for us, that's the Kansas Treasury. And that's why a lot of families, if they go into a bank or they go talk to a financial advisor, they might get a funny look because they don't manage these. And you would not be able to open an ABLE account through in the traditional sense of like a checking or a savings account. They have to be done online. And so again, if you need access to the Kansas ABLE account website, we can provide that, but you can go to the national website and get it very easily. You can open any state's ABLE plan. So if you don't like, I don't know, maybe you don't like the Kansas plan or the Missouri plan, you could go to Ohio or Nebraska's or, Iowa, whatever you would want to do. There are a few states that do not allow out-of-state residents to open an ABLE account. So just be mindful of that. If you do move states, transferring ABLE from one state to another is pretty easy. Also transferring traditional 529 money. So if you have a kiddo who maybe was diagnosed as an older kid, or maybe, for example, autism sometimes doesn't get diagnosed until 3, 5, 6 years old, and you had a traditional college savings account set up for them, you can move the traditional 529 into the ABLE without penalty or tax. So that was a new legislation that happened a few years after ABLE accounts became available. And I love that because that allows us to easily remove funds that could be a countable asset to that child once they turned 18. Okay, downsides. We can only establish them if you have a diagnosis prior to age 26. No exceptions on that yet. I'm hoping they expand that in the near future, but for now, it's mainly you have a disability prior to 26. These don't technically protect an individual from financial fraud. So because they have control of this and they can use the debit card however they want, sometimes people can be taken advantage of if there's not a check and balance in place. So for example, I had a young woman in Missouri who had she had a debit card, and she was working on campus with one of their job coaches, and somebody not part of that program had talked her into buying some gift cards, and it turned out to be a scam. And so then the gift card people got access to her ABLE account money and basically took as much as they could. So it doesn't really protect, there's not a what I would call a secure check and balance in place like there would be with a special needs trust, where you have a trustee, which kind of is the check and balance. There's someone kind of guarding that larger account so that doesn't happen. Contributions are limited, so we can't do a ton of money into these. We can only do about $15,000 a year as of now. And remember, if we have SSI, we can only grow this account to about $100,000 before it becomes a countable asset. Again, with Medicaid, it can go as large as you want, but I will tell you, ABLE accounts in general have limits. There's only so much we can put in them. So for example, if you have a life insurance policy worth $1 million, we can't put it into an ABLE account. The ABLE account can't be the beneficiary of that life insurance policy, unfortunately. If there are funds remaining and you're not in Kansas, then you can have a Medicaid payback that happens, and remaining funds, if they don't pass through the Medicaid clawback, actually do go through probate. So that can be a long process of getting those to the beneficiaries or the heirs. What are the benefits of special needs trust? So this is the legal document we talked about before. And typically a special needs trust, we will create some type of an account, whether that's an investment account, a savings account, could also be a checking account. Think of a special needs trust similar to how you are, right? It's an entity, it's a person, it has a tax ID number, and how we put money in it and how we manage it is very similar to you as a person. It has to file its own taxes, we have to manage the money, etc. So the benefits of this are, we can, this can be used by any person diagnosed with a disability. It doesn't have to be before age 26. There are several different types of special needs trusts. So depending on your situation, you will want to make sure you consult with the estate planning attorney on what's the best for your situation. Because for example, first party trust, you have to be under the age of 65 to set that up. An individual can have an unlimited amount of special needs trusts. So oftentimes I will work with a family who has had a divorce. So one parent does not necessarily want to divulge financial information to the other ex-parent or ex-spouse, excuse me, still a parent. Maybe we have two. The challenge there can be, who is the trustee? Is there one for each? The remaining caregivers, do they have to manage communication between two trustees? Like, how does that work? So I often will tell families, although that's a benefit, make sure that the coordination of the planning is somewhere, that you have some type of arbitrary person that knows the full actual plan, even if some of the monetary funding is a little different. There's no limits. So unlike the ABLE account, you can put as much as you want, but $22 million in a special needs trust if you would like. Life insurance does happen to be the most popular way to fund these because the amount or the death benefit goes in tax-free. And typically, if there's a personal injury settlement, there's also some income tax-free from that within the trust. There is no Medicaid payback if it's a third-party special needs trust, and any remaining assets will go to whatever beneficiary you designate or your family decides on, and will not go through probate. So that does not, any remaining assets then are not a public process. It is very private and it stays private to your family. Downsides to special needs trusts, they do require a trustee. You have to name a trustee to manage ongoing approval of funds, how funds are invested, that they're a fiduciary, all of these things. I've worked with family members who have become trustees overnight, and although they were aware, they were not aware of what the duties were to be a trustee. Filing a 1041, which is a tax form for special needs trusts and other trusts, can get very cumbersome and detailed. I don't love filing my own taxes, so doing these is even more complicated. And again, like I said before, trustees are liable. So it doesn't matter if it is somebody who's a teacher and has never done any kind of financial management before. If they mess up and funds are misappropriated, even unbeknownst to them that it was a misappropriation, they will be held personally liable if that comes to light. Taxes are a downside here. So funds do not grow tax-free in a special needs trust. In fact, it's quite the opposite. If you have more than $13,000, $16,000 of growth inside of a special needs trust, so earnings, then that special needs trust is taxed at the 37% tax bracket as of today's tax rates. So I know we're recording this, and I know we have new administration. So if this changes, please don't hold me accountable to that, because that will change also. But basically, trust tax rates are condensed income tax rates, which means it's very easy to be in that very high tax bracket. So I often will ask families, have you thought about this? What exactly are you putting in the special needs trust, and how is it taxed once it's in there? Very, very, very important to know, because you might be putting something in there that will be spent down very quickly, or a lot of that money will go to the IRS without you really understanding what that meant. And so now all of a sudden we thought this money could last for 20, 30 years, but maybe it will only last for 10. So very important that you have some planning around that. Also very important as to why you need that financial advisor at the table and a good CPA to talk through that. If you are leaving retirement assets, or you're planning to leave retirement assets, if you have those left over at the end of your life, anything like a Roth IRA, which typically is tax-free to us while we're living, that has a required minimum distribution, or an RMD, is subject to tax inside a special needs trust. So very also important that the special needs trust is written appropriately. I have seen some that unnecessarily allow that RMD to go directly to the adult with a disability. Why is that bad? Well, now we've all of a sudden made a distribution of, say, $10,000 directly to the person. We just completely negated why we did the planning in the first place. That is bad, right? Now they're off their benefits. Now we have to wait until that money is spent down completely and reapply and reestablish the entire plan again. So in order to avoid all of that messiness, again, why it's very, very important you work with an estate planning attorney who is very current, who knows what they're doing, who understands the Secure Act that came out recently, and how to make sure that that taxation is left to a minimum, or at least kept to a minimum over time. And then working with an attorney, okay, but yes, we have to do this, but it is kind of a downside because those attorneys aren't free and they require payment. And sometimes a $2,000 to $5,000 estate plan maybe isn't something all families can afford. So that to me is something that has to be considered. If you're a family who has trouble affording this, I do know a few attorneys that will do things pro bono, but it is usually in very unique circumstances. And I would also tell you that if a family has very little means, I would question whether they need a special needs trust or not, right? Because the special needs trust is there to receive any inheritance. It's there to receive the longer term money, houses, real estate, business, vehicles, retirement assets. So if a family has very little means, they may not need a special needs trust if there's really nothing to pass along. I ran into a situation, unfortunately, here in Kansas City where an attorney had talked to a family who was quite literally living in poverty, at the poverty line, into purchasing a special needs trust. And this attorney charged them $5,000 for that trust, just the trust alone, not even any other state documents. And there was nothing to put in this trust. And $5,000 to this family was, I mean, that was food and rent and living expenses for several months. You know, so that was a completely inappropriate recommendation. And thankfully, I do not work with that attorney. Okay, summary. This is a great screenshot, by the way. If you're listening or want to take a really quick screenshot, this is a good one. This is the summary of all of the different comparisons that we just did. ABLE versus third-party special needs trust. So eligibility, again, ABLE is for those under 26, special needs trust, anytime, okay? Setup, we really don't need an attorney to set up an ABLE account. You can definitely do it online in your PJs or like me in your leggings because we're all working remote right now. You do need an attorney for a special needs trust though. And I have families who say, well, you know, I did my will on LegalZoom and I downloaded it off of a website. Can I just do that for a special needs trust? And I would say, no, you cannot. I mean, you can, but it won't work. So there's no point in doing it. And I say that it won't work because for those of you who work or inside of government benefits, Social Security actually employs attorneys. And what do? Well, when a parent or a caregiver passes away, that Social Security attorney looks and reads the special needs trust that's left. I didn't actually know this until a couple years ago. And they get to determine whether that special needs trust is legitimate or if it's written incorrectly. If it's written incorrectly, they toss it aside and say anything in this is countable. So we're not giving SSI or anything else. So you want to work with someone who knows what they're doing because otherwise it ends up costing you more or your child more in the end. Contribution limits, there are limits to the ABLE account, $15,000 a year. It is indexed for inflation, so we will see increases in that contribution limit each year. One other thing I didn't mention, if you have an adult with a disability who's employed, you are allowed to put additional money above and beyond the $15,000 per year. And Social Security has a very specific calculation for that. I believe it's upwards of $12,000 on top of the 15. That has to be from their own earned income. All right, so the 15,000 can come from family or other people. The 12 can come from employment income from that individual with the disability. Okay, so that's good. That allows us to do a little bit more. There are no contribution limits to the special needs trust. Remember too, that if SSI is involved and that adult with a disability will be receiving SSI, we want to make sure that the ABLE account stays at 100,000 or less in total. There is no minimums or maximums for the special needs trust. Wide ranges of use for both. There are some restrictions on the special needs trust if an individual is receiving SSI. There is specific language that is required that says, hey, SSI has to be used and this can only be supplement to that. So that's the reason why it says cannot be used for necessities like housing and food. It just has to be supplemental, and there has to be extreme documentation around that, okay? Taxability. Love ABLE accounts for the tax-free growth and the tax-free distributions. Don't love the taxability of the special needs trust. There is a Medicaid clawback, not in Kansas, but in most states, ABLE accounts have Medicaid clawbacks. Special needs trust does not. Ease of access, a lot of easy access, liquidity to an ABLE account. There is a process to requesting funds from a special needs trust who has a trustee, and there's a reason for that, which we talked about. So pros and cons of each, okay? A lot of families that I work with, it is very typical that you need both, or that you would want both. What I typically will tell families is, hey, think of the ABLE account as the checking or the operating account for the individual with a disability. And the special needs trust is more of our long-term kind of inheritance plan money, right? That's going to receive the larger assets and be used for the longer-term kind of financial security for that person. A few final things before we go into questions. I will tell you, just as a fellow parent and also an advisor that works in this space regularly, please include your entire family in this conversation. This isn't just about the individual with the special need or the disability. It has to be included in your overall financial plan. So oftentimes I will sometimes get families who come to me and say, well, I just want to talk about my child. I don't think you need to know anything about my stuff. And I will respond with, well, isn't your child dependent on you and your financial security? And they say, yes. I said, okay, then how can I give any kind of recommendation if I have no idea where you're coming from? Okay, so just know this has to be a cohesive plan. Think of it as probably the largest transition plan you'll ever create for them. You need to find someone or a team, right, who can help identify your goals, develop a personalized, comprehensive plan. No family I meet with has the same plan. We might follow the same structure and the same process, but I have yet to meet a kiddo that has the same outcome from one diagnosis. It doesn't exist. So make sure that it's personalized to you. Make sure that you're implementing your strategies on a regular basis, having accountability around those. And then most importantly, reviewing the plan. Things change, right? We update our IEPs once a year. We have to go back to the doctor to check in on medications and upgrades to those. This is no different. It has to move along with you and your kiddo. Recap, you need a team. Remember the 3 experts: financial professional, government benefit specialist, and an attorney. You need to work together on developing the special needs plan. So making sure you understand your current situation, your vision for the future, getting the benefits your child may be entitled to. Biggest, most missed piece to special needs planning to me is estimating the future cost of care out of pocket. What are benefits not going to cover and how much is that? And then establishing and creating a funding plan for the special needs trust. And right now, if you have a young child or one that isn't quite an adult yet, we might have to wait. We might have to wait. We might have a rough idea of what that funding plan is, and we might have a rough idea of what benefits they may have access to. But as time goes on, that gets more and more specific. In other words, as you get older, that needs, just like your retirement, as you get closer and closer to retirement, you want to know exactly what money is coming from where and how long that money is going to last, okay? If you would like to discuss your own situation, I promise to give you my contact information again. Here it is. I'm going to pause for a second to see if we have any questions or you would like me to clarify anything I went over. Sometimes I talk really fast.
Yeah, you can either put your questions into the chat box, or if you'd like to take yourself off mute, you can do that. Just a reminder that if the slides go down and your video is on, you will show up on Facebook. I know many people don't want to do that. Your name will not show up on Facebook if your video is on, but I wanted to make that last reminder. So with that said, does anybody have any questions for Kacy?
Hi, Kacy.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
I'm fine.
Good.
I have a hypothesis that I want to bounce off you, and
Love it.
you've already partially answered this when you said that a person can who's employed can contribute $12,000 of their own money a year to the ABLE account. But I think, I've been saying since the beginning of COVID that we're going to be faced with a surge of people wanting competitive employment.
Mhm.
We're also going to have a lot of people who were employed that are going to be returning to competitive employment.
Mhm.
And although that VR has committed to reopening cases that they've already closed as successfully employed, there's going to be too many people who that need the service because they're going to be going back into a different situation. They're going to need more natural supports that they didn't have before, or different natural supports. So could they use the ABLE account to pay for job coaching services?
Totally. Absolutely. That's a regular expense from ABLE.
Right.
And
Because-
really even not even just job coaching, honestly. I mean, if it's a job listing, resume creation, any supports around employment would be absolutely a allowable expense from ABLE, or a special needs trust for that matter.
Yeah, I'm thinking that even with their best efforts, and VR is making a lot of best efforts lately.
Yeah.
It's so time limited. When a red flag goes up, you have to answer it right away. You can't wait a month.
No.
So,
You're right. And really ABLE came about because of a story actually that happened on the East Coast of an adult woman who had Down syndrome, was employed full-time, and she learned very quickly her mother passed, who was her financial security, and she couldn't save for her own retirement with her employment income. And that was very bothersome to her and her family. So that's what started this whole conversation around having something where persons with disabilities could, take control and start saving on their own too. I mean, they're working, why not? So I love that the roots of the creation of ABLE accounts did come from the employment world. So yeah, that question is a really good one. And I do agree with you. I think we are going to see hopefully even more allowability of earned income going into ABLE. I really want to see that increase. To me, that would be the most necessary besides the age increase.
We have we have some questions in the chat. One is, can you have more than one ABLE account?
No. That's easy. No. One per social.
If there is a need to spend down what is in my son's account to keep him below the $2,000, can that go into a current special needs trust that has not yet been activated? I'm assuming not.
Okay, let me break that one down into two answers. First answer is, if you have an account where you have access that you're accumulating over the $2,000, that's what I'm hearing, right? Okay, I'm going to assume that's what it is. If it's not, then email me, we'll talk more. Let's say you're getting SSI, or your child is getting SSI, and that's going into their rep payee account, right? If you're the guardian and you're the rep payee, what my advice would be is to have your adult or child with a disability open the ABLE account, or you as guardian or rep payee open the ABLE account, which either can be done. And either you're charging rent or you're charging for services to that adult child. Okay, and then you put that money, whatever that amount is, let's call it, you're charging $500 in rent or utilities or transportation, whatever you want to, services, whatever you want to call it, that becomes your income as a parent / guardian. Then you can make a parental contribution to ABLE and preserve that money for them. Yes, you can put it into a special needs trust, but you need an account at a bank in the special needs trust titling. So it has to be titled as the special needs trust. Hudson has an active special needs trust. I don't love it because we keep a very small amount in there because it is taxable. You have to file taxes on that account every year. So any earnings inside of there are basically null and void because it's such high tax. So either one you can do, and you can preserve that money longer term for your child that's receiving SSI, especially if you're accumulating excess. And I would advise you to do that because the more we can save long term for them, the better off they're going to be, and the less stress is put on the family financially, right? So yeah, I mean, you can do either, but in order to do it inside of a special needs trust, you have to have a tax ID number for the special needs trust, which means then you're filing taxes on that account every year. So I hope that helps. If that didn't answer your question or there's more specifics to that, call me, email me, we'll talk more.
How does it happen that a special needs trust that is transferred at parent's death to adult with disability get taxed? Not sure I understand the idea of the trust being taxed or losing SSI in the process.
Well, if you have assets that are dedicated to a special needs trust, they're not going to lose benefits. So if the trust is written correctly, mom and dad, usually special needs trusts are set up to what we call testamentary special needs trusts. So in other words, they don't become technically active until mom and dad pass away. Once mom and dad pass away, that trust is now that child's only account other than ABLE, hopefully, if we did it right. Earnings, let's say mom and dad had $1 million of life insurance that go into the special needs trust. Okay, so that money transfers tax-free into the special needs trust because it's a life insurance policy. If it's a retirement account, let's say you have $100,000 in a 401k that goes into the special needs trust, that's different. That will be taxed. Okay, just again, that's IRS rules, that's not me. But the life insurance goes in tax-free. However, if the life insurance earns interest, if it's invested, if it is, I don't know, in a high interest rate savings account, whatever that means right now. Let's just call it, it earns 6%. You invest it conservatively and you get 6% earnings on that $1 million. Well, 6% of $1 million is 60,000. Anything over 13,000 in 1 year of earnings is at a 37% tax bracket. So take off the 13,000, the remaining 47,000 or so is taxed at the 37% bracket. Just like you filing an individual tax return, you have an income tax bracket that you file in and you owe tax for. The special needs trust is no different. It's just those tax brackets are condensed much more heavily. I hope that answers that question. So it's not necessarily the special needs trust loses that person's benefits. All I was saying was the earnings inside of the trust or the assets inside of the trust can be taxed very heavily if you're not careful. And so I'll give you a strategy, all right? Once we get into more complex planning, ideally what I like to see is any earnings inside the special needs trust. If we can take off $15,000 of those earnings and put it into an ABLE account, guess what? We don't have to give that $15,000 to the IRS, and now it can grow tax-free in the ABLE. That's good, right? Why aren't attorneys telling you that? I don't know, probably because they're not financial planners. This is why you need the team. So the taxes, the planning, how money is moved, we all need strategy around that. If you don't have that right now or you don't understand it, you know, let's set up a plan. Call me and we can work that out. I hope that helps.
So follow up on the last question that you asked. This is right now our special needs trust doesn't kick in until I die. So you are saying set up an ABLE account now, which can go into a special needs trust after I die?
No, they're not combined. They're separate.
She said she may email later.
That's fine.
And then she said, I think you just answered my question. So
that's fine. It can get confusing. Look, I know it's a lot of information in a short period of time. Totally fine.
Does anybody else have any questions? If you want to take yourself off mute and ask a question, feel free to do that.
There was a question on Facebook that says, to clarify, if you invest the money in the ABLE account, is that taxable?
In ABLE, no. But we can only put cash into ABLE, remember, because there's a limit on how much you can put in. So an
there's
ABLE
no
account,
investments in ABLE.
well, you can invest cash inside of ABLE. So ABLE offers different investment options. They're very limited, right? It's not like a traditional 401k or Roth IRA where you get to pick what's inside of it. The ABLE account, so for example, Kansas ABLE account has like 5 different options you can invest in. It's like conservative, cash, balanced, aggressive, or very aggressive. Okay, you pick which one of those you want based on your risk tolerance, and then that's invested in different mutual fund companies, of which they don't really tell us what those are. And I have one, and I manage my daughters, and I have no idea how they're investing that money. They don't really tell you. But that's how they keep fees low. You know, the costs inside of ABLE accounts for a traditional versus a traditional investment account are different. The money inside, whether it's in cash or you do choose to invest the cash in the ABLE, grows tax-free. There will be no taxes due on the ABLE account.
I have a two-part question on ABLE accounts. One, let's say I set up an ABLE account for my son Matthew here in Kansas, but then he moves to Texas, and the account's still with Kansas, but he's in Texas. He passes away. Does Texas, one of the other states, can it claw back the money for Medicaid, or because it's in a Kansas account, it can't be clawed back?
Ooh, that's a good one. Where are his benefits coming from, Texas or Kansas?
I would probably say Texas. If he's living there, then he'll be getting, like, if he were to still receive SSI or Medicaid in Texas, then they would be from Texas.
Yeah, and how it, not that it really matters, but has he been using his ABLE account if it's still in Kansas?
Well, he probably would.
Okay.
This is in the future, if he were to move to Texas and live in another state, any state, not just Texas, but any state.
Now, I would probably want clarification on this, and I have exactly the guy who can answer this question specifically, and that's Tom Tracy at Kansas ABLE. But if it were me and Texas Medicaid tried to claw back on another state's ABLE account, I'd be surprised, first of all. They'd have to know about it, and I don't know that that's necessarily possible across state lines. But two, technically, the buck stops at wherever the ABLE account is kept, right? So I would tell you keep it in Kansas, especially if he moves to Texas or any other state that may not have that prevention of clawback, because there is protection there. In order for Texas Medicaid to put a lien on the Kansas ABLE account, they have to contact Kansas ABLE. And Kansas ABLE may say, well, no, you can't do this because that's not a thing here. So that would be my hunch. I would fight that if they did question it. Maybe they could. I haven't had that situation come up yet.
Yeah, they haven't been around that long, right?
No.
You did mention one thing though, like you mentioned if they knew about it. Like, I mean, if he were to live in Texas and start getting Medicaid at Texas, wouldn't he have to say, hey, I have an ABLE account? Or
he could, but it's still not it's still not countable because it's a federal regulated account and created account. So it wouldn't matter. If he did disclose it, that's fine. It still wouldn't matter if it was in the ABLE or the special needs trust. That brings up another point too, Stephanie. If you have a special needs trust that the state you created it in was Kansas and he moves to Texas, and let's say you pass away, well, you're going to need two trustees, one that's licensed in Texas and one that's licensed in Kansas, which can be expensive on the trust. You also need two people who know both Texas and Kansas benefits inside and out. So that can get complicated.
All right. And the second part to that question was like, what would be the benefit if, especially if you live in Kansas, what would be the benefit to choose another state? Or like in Wisconsin, what would be a deciding factor to choose Kansas over Missouri in opening an ABLE account?
Oh, great question. So in my experience, the actual way or the software in which ABLE accounts are managed on has become a pretty big topic for those who have ABLE accounts. So I'd say two things. Number one, fees. Different states charge different fees inside of the ABLE account. So you want to know what those are and how they work. Different states have different investment options. So like Kansas has the generic option. There are states that offer you specifics like, hey, here are the Vanguard funds you have access to. You can be more specific on how you invest that money. Some people like that. They want a specific mutual fund company, or I want only Fidelity, or I want American funds, whatever that is. But last, I would say probably the most important is that operating software. I don't love the online management of Kansas's plan. And it's not because it's not simple. It is pretty simple to manage and control, but it's not like I can't store everything, all the expenses that Hudson has had on her ABLE account online. I mean, it shows distributions, but there's no like way to label those distributions. So I have to physically keep electronic records of how I've spent her ABLE, just in case anybody asks. You know, if I'm audited or the IRS wants to question a distribution, I have to prove that it was for her and for her benefit under ABLE guidelines for spendability. So I don't love that it's kind of cumbersome to keep all those records. For example, in Ohio or California, the software is incredible. You can label things online. They keep online records for up to 7 years. You can download reports for your own, edification. Or for example, I had a few clients that just wanted the spending that was done over the last year to be curious, like, hey, we can use that in the cost planning in the future because we might need more than we thought we needed. California has their own software plan. Ohio was one of the first states that created ABLE accounts, and they spent quite a bit of money making that online software really usable and user-friendly for both people with disabilities and their guardians. So either of those states, from a usability or user experience standpoint, to me is superior than what I've seen in some of the states here locally. So Missouri actually uses Ohio's platform. So if you're in Missouri, you're lucky, got a better experience than we do.
Okay, I got one more question because it brought it up, but like if somebody were in Wisconsin or let's say Ohio and opened up an ABLE account in Kansas, does that mean Medicaid couldn't claw back their funds because it was a Kansas account, or is it just residents of Kansas?
Residents of Kansas.
Okay.
So it's important that if, let me think about this for a second. If the person with a disability is a Kansas resident and opens a Kansas ABLE account, that Medicaid clawback prevention is legit. If you are an Ohio resident and you open a Kansas ABLE account, then no, you don't get that protection of the clawback, at least from my understanding of the law.
Okay. I'm going to go on to other people's questions now. This comes from Facebook. After we pass away, we are being taxed now. Does that tax again on interest earned money in like Edwards Jones, etc.?
Oh yes, taxes are always due whatever account it's in, unless it's like a Roth IRA, but an inherited Roth IRA will be taxed. So very important to understand how those accounts or whatever asset you're passing on to your family members, how that works. Now, I will say the actual inheritance itself, so the transferring of the account from you, if you pass away, to your child, that's not the taxable situation usually, unless you're a family who has a net worth of over $11.58 million. That's the estate tax limit right now. But if you're under that, usually it's not taxable upon receipt, but there will be taxes due on growth in earnings or distributions, usually on most investment accounts after you're gone. And remember, if any of those are in a special needs trust, because that tax bracket in a special needs trust is condensed, that 37% tax bracket is really easy to hit. So again, just making sure you've got a good plan around that, how that looks, how it works, how it's managed. Is it invested? Is it growing appropriately? Are we moving money to the ABLE account when we need to and preserving as much as we can? All of that is really important to factor in.
Another question, does trust fund charge for managing of said funds to person assigned to?
Usually, yes. There are fees for a trustee to be a trustee. But I would tell you most family members that take on a trustee role at some point in time do need compensation for their time, because it takes a lot of time to manage a special needs trust. It's not just a annual distribution and you're one and done for the year and you can go about your full-time job and take care of your own kids. No, this is a daily job, and sometimes almost weekends and vacations and somebody with a disability, if their plumbing explodes on Christmas Day, guess what? You're going in and finding a plumber on Christmas Day to fix it, right? It is not a job that is a one and done, or it is what I would call a very limited time position. So most special needs trusts, and really any other trust, will allow for compensation of the trustee, no matter who the trustee is. So I'd tell you, yes, the corporate trustee is going to charge a fee, but typically it is not, to me, it's not an exorbitant fee compared to what could happen if that trustee did the wrong thing. And most of the time, the corporate trustees, at least the ones that I've worked with, they charge a very fair fee, and usually it's not over a certain amount per year unless something is really, I don't know, really crazy, or there's a lot of time intensiveness to it that year. But I'd be happy to discuss that with you to kind of get an idea of what that looks like. I'd also say, you know, if you have investments, right, and if you need management of real estate that's going into the trust, somebody's got to do that. And most people are not going to do that completely for free or for a very low cost, just because you want it done right and you want to make sure that those assets are preserved.
Well, we have a few minutes left. Does anybody else have any other questions? Give it a minute.
I hope this was helpful. Did you guys find this valuable? Rahel saying yes.
I can't see all the faces.
I know.
So, okay. Well, thank you, Kacy. We appreciate you being here and sharing this information.
Of course.
To give you all a heads up, next month, March 11th, is our event in Families Together, which is the Parent Training Information Center in the state of Kansas. We'll be presenting on remote learning and telehealth tips for success. It'll be as families shift into a new way of accessing services for their child or youth with special needs. They often find it challenging and confusing. In this session, families will learn tips on how to have a successful telehealth visit, as well as ideas on how to make remote learning a meaningful and rewarding experience. And from what I've heard over this last year, it's been some difficult experiences for families. So we will look forward to you joining us. If you have done the pre-survey, you will get a copy or an email with the post-survey. We hope that you will take that and get that done by Monday, and we'll do in for a drawing. And thanks again for joining us tonight. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks for putting this together. You're
Thanks.
awesome. Bye, guys.
Bye.